So, President Biden's foreign policy has already proved to be an absolute disaster. Over the weekend, it just got even worse because it was revealed that the U.S. State Department was recently hit by a cyber attack. And the possibility of a serious breach has been made by the Department of Defense Cyber Command. Now, between this and Afghanistan, and I'm questioning, is it related to somebody trying to look for information on our assets? What are we looking at for the future of national security? Joining me now to discuss is Lisa Daftari, editor-in-chief of the Foreign Desk News. Lisa, good to see you. Appreciate your perspectives out there. Thanks for joining us today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Of course. I have to start off with a cyber attack because I don't believe in coincidences, at least when it happens at this level. And my first thought was, is someone trying to get information on any of the assets that we're trying to evacuate? What is your take on this? And really, why was it not addressed in any of the press conferences today?
Right. So to start backwards from your last question, well, why wasn't it addressed? The Biden administration's new stance, this wasn't the case before we withdrew from Afghanistan, but the new stance is we can't disclose any more than that. Now, all of a sudden, everything became all secretive. But before we withdrew from Afghanistan, we basically sent a save the date and location to the Taliban as to which bases we would be evacuating, when we would be evacuating, and to what extent. So, and I 100% agree with you. There are no coincidences, particularly in foreign policy, or even if this breach is not directly related to what's going on in Afghanistan, it's not directly the Taliban or a linked group to the Taliban. It's not a coincidence that once the U.S. is perceived as weak, it emboldens our enemies. Just a few hours ago, the Iranian regime announced that they would be doing tests with Russia. Well, of course they are. Now everyone's chest thumping around us because we are down and we are looking more pathetic than ever. We were in Afghanistan for 20 years, and the administration is trying to conflate the decision to withdraw with how they withdrew. And that's an issue because, the failure here is in the way in which we withdrew, the way that it was done in a very, very irrational and without any plans and without any strategy to remove Americans. And as you know, we've been talking about this for over a week now. But I think this goes back to looking at our soft targets, looking at the fact that our enemies are always one step ahead of us. And that's never been the case in the United States, whether it's been cyber or on the battlefield. It's always been that the United States has a will to win, and that puts us ahead of our enemies. And very unfortunately, we all have to watch our backs right now. We are all, in the harm's way. We can be hacked. I was hacked actually just a few months ago by the Iranian regime, and they continue to try to hack anybody who speaks out against them. So these are all soft targets, and we all have to watch out.
And no protection for American citizens really so much here, much less over in Afghanistan. Lisa, you bring up a really good point, too, about projecting strength, none of which I've heard from the administration's counter to that August 31st deadline by the Taliban, which I think is going to determine a lot how this goes, whether this turns into an official hostage situation or unofficial. What is your take on that? And what have I haven't seen anything that gives me any confidence from this administration yet on that count.
Yeah, this might become something much more heated, and we'll see if the White House backs down or not, if they go to bat for those Americans who are still in harm's way. But it looks as though, this is the first time the Taliban came out with their PR efforts and said, look, we're a new group. We're going to be nice to the women, and don't worry, you can work with us and all that. Obviously, no one's believing them. Well, maybe the people in the White House want us to believe that. But just as soon as President Biden announces that we might not make the 31st deadline, the Taliban came out and said, oh, heck no, you're not extending this any further, meaning they are showing no leniency. And again, it's going to be the positioning of the White House. Someone asked me on the radio show this morning saying, what's next? Will this turn into a huge frenzy? Will the terror organizations all collaborate together and pile up against the free world? Or will we see them going to bat against each other? Meaning, is there going to be more competition for funding and all of that? And my response to that is the same as my response to you, in that the positioning from the White House in the next 2 weeks to a month is going to be crucial. Where we stand on the extension of the deadline, where we stand on getting Americans out, how strong we look after this weakness that's been perceived, obviously, by not just Afghanistan, but the Iranian regime and Hamas and Hezbollah and all of our enemies, the Chinese and Russians alike. It's going to be very important how our posture.
I have to ask you too, Lisa, this situation with WhatsApp, I have heard that may be addressed. I had two different different cuts from the press conferences that have been had over the past week. This was all done out in the open. I mean, apparently there were journalists there in Afghanistan on the ground saying, "Oh, by the way, Taliban are just rolling into this provincial town here, announcing that if anybody who's with the Ghani administration would like to turn themselves in, they can do so. Here's the number via WhatsApp." I guess Mark Milley and nobody at Pentagon or DoD was reading this.
Or they were ignoring it, just like so many other warnings that they got over the last few months, years. Look, experts have been warning for years because we knew we had to exit, Dana. That's the point here. We knew we had to exit. The question was, how are we going to do it? And they completely fumbled, and they completely put these Americans who already paid so much with their lives, with their families' lives, with their time, all the Afghan people who helped us. What's the message here? Don't help America, don't trust America. I mean, that's what the Iranian regime is telling the rest of the world. They're telling Israel, watch out for your best friend here. They're not going to help you out. They're going to turn their back on you, because that's the message from the White House right now. This is awful. And of course, our priority here is getting these Americans out. But secondly, to, at least triage the situation as best as possible, because we have a huge both terror, jihadi, and ideological war that's going to explode on us.